From 2008 through about 2014, I was more or less the only journalist in all of Massachusetts who dug deep into the pockets of the Commonwealth's corporate charter school movement, in the process revealing millions of dollars that were funneled to the goons who want to privatize education in our state. There were a couple of opinion editorials and major rags that saw things the way that I did along the way, but without much exaggeration, there were points when it felt like I was fighting against million-dollar public relations firms all alone. Even my editors at the liberal Boston Phoenix for a lot of that time didn't agree with me about the dangers of allowing business forces to co-opt places of learning. It got to the point where I felt like a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, until the tide began to turn around 2014. I never thought it would actually happen, but as corporate forces mounted their fraudulent campaign in the run-up to last year's ballot question to remove the cap on charter schools, people started to see through the lies. I won't take too much credit, since it was really the work of union teachers and their friends and families all across the state who ultimately saved the day. But I would like to think that there were at least some people who had the wool lifted from over their eyes after reading my coverage. Take, for example, the time I exposed how a dean at English High School was relocated and shuffled like a pedophile priest through several schools that are run by third-party contractors until he shot a student in the head who was selling drugs for him. At one school before that, he'd asked a female student for her phone number. But under the kind of corporate operatorship endorsed by countless elected officials of both parties, he was able to continue preying on students until he actually attempted to murder one. Most outlets, especially the neoliberal Boston Globe, never did come around against charter schools. They backed them right up until the election and are still reluctant to acknowledge just how knee-deep in despicable donations many of the politicians who support privatization are. I don't bring all this up just to pound my chest, though there's always that as well. I rant because even though the ballot initiative to lift the cap on charter schools was defeated, the legacy of the charter school fight lives on. From the frequent characterization of public school teachers as lazy or underpaid, to the offering of pedagogical platforms to venture capitalists who have never seen the inside of a classroom. The charter fight, however many headlines it's made, is just a small piece of a much larger puzzle and assault on public ed. According to the most recent U.S. News & World Report survey, Massachusetts has the third best schools for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade in the entire country, though you never know it from listening to those who want to infiltrate and profit off of education. Dissenting on this front can be extremely lonely. In my crusade, I've been attacked on social media and in countless emails, as has my mother, who taught for 22 years in a public school in Brooklyn, has been the principal of several public schools, and currently works with foster care children in Florida. Because I went to a mix of public and private schools myself, my mother and I have both been called hypocrites for our support of public ed. But that's where my opponents get it wrong, because unlike so many people who are primarily concerned with their own children, I actually care about all children and about supporting policies that will benefit the most instead of an elite, gifted, and fortunate few. If the schools in my New York City neighborhood had been safe, my family wouldn't have had to seek a private school scholarship from me. So it's interesting to be insulted by people who have no experience in urban schools whatsoever. And on that note, we thought to use this episode of Beyond Boston, in which we attempt to show how similar issues impact communities throughout our region, to offer a glimpse into various aspects of education in Mass that don't always surface in most media. President Trump's horrific pick for Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos, is the least of your problems. There are plenty of snakes in the grass right here in Mass. First, we have a clip from Brookline Interactive Group about a topic that isn't always the sexiest, but that is certainly something we should all pay attention to regardless of the city or town that we live in: school budgeting and teacher contract negotiations.
Last week, the Brookline Education Union held a public forum for educators, parents, and students to explain the current ongoings within the Brookline public school system, including the recent negotiations for a contract led by paraprofessionals. The BEU confirmed they tentatively accepted 3 contract agreements with the Brookline School Committee after 3 years of negotiations.
Finally, during the weekend before the educators were to vote for a work-to-rule election, we received another proposal from the school committee, and our negotiation team accepted that offer.
The contracts include yearly salary increases for both teachers and paraprofessionals, improvements to teacher evaluation procedures for students, and the creation of a workload oversight committee. The BEU points out that the school committee has reported the district will increase paraprofessional hours by 10%.
If there is no time reserved to do something well, the contract requires the school district to work out a solution. We thank you for supporting us. That is how we will move toward a more equitable and more effective school system from within.
On March 27th, teachers, paraprofessionals, and union administrators will vote on whether or not to ratify such agreements. Despite disappointment on behalf of some educators in the BEU, the union released a statement recommending members to vote yes to accept the contracts.
I can only hope that this agreement will be treated as a first step towards paraprofessionals being more valued and respected in the future by the school committee, but we are not there yet.
Speakers at the event also expressed educator concerns about the level of importance placed on data collection and standardized testing within the school district in Brookline and throughout Massachusetts.
You know, I heard a lot tonight about testing and standardization. I don't have enough time to talk about this, but standardization is white supremacy. If we're going to talk about racial justice, what are we standardizing to? What's the history that that standardization is coming from? What's the history that the testing that proves that standardization is coming from?
Citizens for the Public Schools, a state-based organization for the improvement of public education for all, offered attendees of the forum information about having their child opt out of standardized testing and suggests the opt-out movement has led to changes in state and local testing policies in other states.
Schools are places where we begin that work. That's why they're so important, and that's why they're coming after them. Schools are revolutionary places at their best, right?
From Brookline Interactive Group, I'm Monique Avila.
Our guest this month is Barbara Maddaloni, the president of the Massachusetts Teachers Association. Representing more than 100,000 teachers and instructors statewide, the MTA is a significant force, though one that is often sideswiped and maligned in the media, despite the fact that its members teach and care for our children. The Globe recently called Maddaloni a combative firebrand, and while I think they meant that in a bad way, here on Beyond Boston we consider it high praise. We're thankful to have her on to talk about everything from the remnants of charter school ballot fight to the current war over high-stakes testing. Barbara, thank you very much for joining us.
Delighted to be here. Delighted to be acknowledged as a combative firebrand.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do, right?
Yeah, it's a good thing. We need more of them.
Yeah. So, can you just tell us a little bit about your membership and where, generally speaking, where they are and what's on the horizon besides teaching and the everyday duties?
Well, we have 110,000 members across the state, pre-K through higher ed. That includes classroom teachers, paraprofessionals, bus drivers, custodians, and in higher ed it includes faculty, professional staff, classified staff. So we really are the people who educate and serve the children of Massachusetts.
One reason we wanted to talk about education this month is because, just like a lot of other people, we have really focused on a lot of the kind of seemingly imminent threats of the Trump administration, how they trickle down into the greater Boston area in particular. But education is one of these things that it just doesn't exist. When it's not around, when there's not a big charter school fight, when it's not, some big messy brawl, it's out of the news, it's out of the media. What is the role of, I guess, your role in keeping the fight alive and moving forward, even after, say, the charter school ballot initiative?
It's an interesting question because I actually think that education, public education, should be the center of our fight, not only against the Trump administration, but certainly here in Massachusetts against the Baker and Secretary Pizer administration. There's a lot to be said for alliances in terms of ideology between Betsy DeVos, the National Secretary of Education, and our Secretary Pizer. Both are interested in privatizing. Both maintain sort of an austerity mindset that says do more with less. And both have been instrumental in undermining public education and opportunities, places where they've had an opportunity to do so. Here in Massachusetts, it's the high-stake testing that they use, that we're in the middle of testing season right now here in Massachusetts, and I can't tell you how many letters I'm getting, emails from educators and from parents who really say we have to stop this. Like we've gone down a rabbit hole with the testing. I don't know if people who aren't in schools understand how problematic it is and the way it's being used to prove that our schools are failing. But we also are expected to function under these austerity budgets where more and more we're supposed to do more with less. And there hasn't been a commitment from the governor and enough from the State House to say we're going to fully fund our public schools.
Give us an example of a true horror story related to high stakes testing, and also can you tell us why is this kind of whitewashed? I mean, we hear so many people angry and screaming about Betsy DeVos here in the Bay State. It's almost like, and I agree with you. There's a lot of definitely far right ideological thinking going on right in the governor's office. With all these things, why isn't there more outrage? I guess.
Well, I think part of it is that, quite honestly, over the last 25 years, it wasn't just the right-wing Republicans who brought corporate ed reform to public education. The Democrats were aligned right with them. I like to say that the Democrats walked us to the abyss. That is Betsy DeVos. They bought the language of the failing public schools. They bought the austerity narratives. They bought the story of the failing teacher, and they refused to have the conversations about economic and racial injustice and what that means for the young people coming into our schools and for the communities in which those students live. So it's been a long cycle of people who were supposedly our friends not working with us on public education. But the sort of good news, bad news about the Trump administration is that people are really paying attention. And I actually think public education, we saw this in the Question 2 campaign, people value educator voices, they want to hear from educators, and they really value public education. Like it's like almost in our blood. It's like a visceral thing when you talk to people. What they want is fully funded public schools, and they want schools to be places where children can go and experience the world in a sort of hopeful, joyful, creative way. So we want to access that and bring that conversation forward. Part of what we're going to do is there's going to be a rally May 20th here in Boston, the Rally for Public Education, and we want it to be both the message is resist privatization and high-stakes testing, fully fund our schools, but let's also celebrate the incredible possibility that is public education, which started here in Massachusetts.
How do you really explain privatization to your average voter, your average parent who, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, they just want their kid to go to school and they're not necessarily thinking about the long term? What is the ultimate impact, and how do you really? It's a strange phenomenon to many.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that the key is that when people think about their public school, they actually, I think, do think of it in terms of like sort of the foundation of democracy. Like the school committee is elected officials. The ideal of a public school is we bring all of our children together, all of our young people together, with a very specific mission that they're going to learn how to live in a world that's a democratic space. What privatization is one of the major things it does is it removes the elected school committee from the picture. You get appointed boards of directors or self-appointed or appointed by the commissioner. So the idea of having elected officials disappears, and then you have private interests coming in and making decisions about curriculum and about hiring and firing, where there's no more public input. And there's opportunities in that, even in a nonprofit, for profit. So that public education is not supposed to be an institution for profit. It's supposed to be an institution of the common good. People are coming in and finding ways to profit from it, whether that's through charter schools, through these sort of education consulting companies, or testing, which is a huge profit industry. And now what's coming, personalized learning, with education being delivered through a computer, and we don't even need educators at that point. We just need good software, apparently.
And we've seen the havoc of that in Tennessee and some other states. So with a lot of these trends, how do teachers really stay the course? And and is it different? what's it like for teachers to be fighting these kind of political battles, and then they're in the class all day? And I'm wondering, when you're out for like an event like on May 20th, does that make a difference when people say, oh yeah, these are the actual teachers? They're actually people. It's not just some faceless union like it's often referred to in the news. So what do you tell your teachers? Is it always marching orders, or is it kind of more like a general,
I mean, first of all, to go back to the No on 2 campaign, I mean, it was really positive for our educators to knock on doors and say, hi, I'm an educator, and I'd like to talk to you about question 2. Right. The welcome that we received was just amazing. And so in spite of all of the sort of media narrative that is abusing teachers, the reality on the ground is very different. People love their teachers. They love they recognize the commitment that people are making. So part of what I try to do when I talk to educators is to help them recognize the reality on the ground and build from that, the quality of their work, the meaning of the work, the joy that they get to experience in their work, and recognize that there's enormous power in that. There's power both within our unions to build from that, and there's power in the coalitions that are possible from that. So something like a rally is a great space to feel your power and to feel your alliances with students and parents and community members. But at the same time, it's very painful to be a teacher right now. We just had a meeting this weekend talking about the kind of bullying that's happening from administrators who are trying to impose these accountability systems. And they were talking quite honestly about what it's like to have to impose practices that they know are bad for students. People get really emotional about that. So our job is to help them recognize that emotion, get angry enough to fight, to not say I'm just sad and depressed, but to say I'm angry and we're not going to let this happen anymore, which is, I guess, how I get labeled a combative firebrand, but that's okay with me.
Well, we appreciate, we'll have your the combative firebrand on anytime. Thank you so much for stopping by. So that's May 20th, and where can people get information about that?
Go to massteacher.org, and it'll be up there.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now we have a clip from Cambridge Community Television, which is hosting Beyond Boston this month, followed by some parting words from BINJ Network Director Jason Pramus.
Hi, I'm Frank Morris Lopez, and I am the coordinator of Neighbor Media, the citizen journalism program here at Cambridge Community Television. And I'm here today with Janelle Anderson, and Janelle is one of our interns. She is a student at Simmons College and is studying journalism.
Yep, that's right, and minoring in English.
All right, great. Well, Janelle's been doing a lot of great work for us in the Neighbor Media program. You can check out her work along with all the other work of our citizen journalists here in Cambridge at neighbormedia.org. And Janelle recently did a story about what it's like to be teaching under a Trump administration.
Right.
Okay, and so Janelle went to Fairweather Street School to find out how students and teachers are affected by a Trump administration and what they're doing in the classroom. Janelle, do you want to tell us about what you found?
Yeah, well, I found out about Fairweather after hearing about their children's march that was occurring on Valentine's Day. It was a really cool march. It was called the Show What Love Means to You March. Okay. And I wasn't able to attend it, but I really still want to do a story about the school because I thought it was really cool. So I contacted the teacher, Jennifer K. Goodman, on Facebook, actually. I Facebook Messenger.
Oh, wow, okay, great.
And she got back to me and I was like, I want to interview you in your class about sort of the political engagements you've been conducting and sort of engaging in. And she let me do it. And so I found out that they actually created a class called Take Action Thursdays, where every Thursday, one day out of the week, they get to sort of engage in political discourse and sort of come up with projects and other ways to contribute to the community.
Wow, that sounds really progressive for a school, and the reason being is so Fairweather Street School is
it's a private school.
It's a private school. So how are they affected, if at all, then by a Trump administration?
Right. Well, when I talked to the teachers, I originally wanted to focus on Betsy DeVos's confirmation, sort of how that was going to affect the school and sort of their environment. And what they told me is that they're actually advocates for private schools. They say that The private school structure allows them to have more freedom in the curriculum for their students. So they're able to sort of engage in these political discussions because they're not supposed to, they don't have to focus on like MCAS or like focusing on a test. They get to really alter the curriculum for the students.
Okay, great. So it's going to look a bit different than what happens in the public schools or even in charter schools.
Yeah.
Like you said, they have more flexibility. And they created a program. They said that there wasn't really much political, there wasn't a class on politics.
No, it came directly out of the Trump campaign.
Out of the Trump campaign.
Election.
Let's skip ahead first of all to, so election night. The teachers had an assignment. And what was that assignment?
The assignment, Jennifer told her students that night to write a journal entry about what it felt like to have the first female president. And that obviously didn't end up happening. So I remember they told me the next day was like trauma care.
Wow.
And the students were completely devastated. Since like Trump announced his campaign, when he like made comments about Mexican immigrants, the children were upset because like they were learning about Mexico and like Mexican culture and Mexican Americans. And so it's just been like a steady, just like escalation of just like how disappointed they've been about what's unfolding on the political stage. Wow. And now they just get to talk about it more in class and sort of see that unfolding before them.
So the 7th and 8th graders shocked just as much of the rest of the world.
I think they were. Yeah. I mean, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I'm a student too, and I remember going in. My professors were like, "I'm sorry," like it's not your fault, but we were all sort of thinking that Hillary was going to be president.
Yeah. So now they're kind of putting, their lessons into action with the what was it called on Thursday? Take Action Thursdays. So what are some of the different projects that they've been engaging in on these Take Action Thursdays?
Well, it's really interesting actually because I think a lot of the kids had trouble choosing what topic they wanted to focus on. A lot of the kids chose to focus on food security. Okay. Some groups chose to focus on women's rights, workers' rights, farmers' rights. There's just sort of like a whole variety of things they chose to focus on, and a lot of the time they collaborated with each other. It was just all of sort of a group effort in the classroom.
And so with the food security, so there one point where they were preparing food for
they prepared food for different sort of places in Cambridge. I actually got to visit them one time and sort of observe their Take Action Thursdays in action. They were preparing food for different homeless shelters in Cambridge and for Friday Cafes, which is a sort of program for created by First Church, where they get to interact with homeless community members in Cambridge and sort of bring food and chat, and they like made food for that sort of event.
Great. And there was a quote from one of the teachers as well when they were doing research on pasta.
It was so funny. So a good thing is that also when they're having these projects, that the teachers really allow the students to sort of take control of the situation. So they happened to get some ingredients donated, and they had to like write the letters and like the thank you notes to the different community locations on campus that donated to them. And then they also had to buy some of the food, so they sort of like pitched in their own lunch money to buy some of the ingredients. So the teacher ended up buying some of the ingredients on Amazon Fresh, and the first thing that comes up when you search noodles, like lasagna noodles, that was one of the things they were making that day, is Barilla, which apparently I found out later on, after she told me and I like researched it later, the founder of Barilla has been known to make anti-gay comments, and she said, no, I couldn't buy Barilla, so I had to go with Rizzoni. So it's just like, one kid was like, everything is political.
Yeah, that was a great quote from the kid in the article.
Didn't want to buy anti-gay noodles.
Everything's political. Well, great. So your next step then is you're going to try to go into a public school.
Yeah, I really want the opportunity to compare how public versus private schools can interact with their students and sort of engage in that political discourse. I wonder if it's different. I wonder, if public schools will have more of the opportunity to do that, because Bayweather has an entire class dedicated to that one day out of the week that they get to do it. And then they also engage in things outside of school time. So I'm just wondering if that's the case for other schools, specifically public schools, and seeing how that can compare in this current political climate.
Great. Well, we'll find out when we check out Janelle's articles as well as all the other articles at neighbormedia.org. Janelle, thanks for being on.
Thank you. No problem.
Over the last couple of decades, it has become fashionable for Americans to attack our public education system. Behind these attacks is that most un-American of attitudes, elitism. This is problematic for a number of reasons, the main one being that America remains a democracy. Not a perfect democracy where citizens get to vote on pretty much every decision at every level, but a system of government where citizens can at least have some political impact when they stand up for themselves in the voting booth and in daily life. In a democracy, the education of all children capable of being educated is a vital necessity, because as a political system, it can only continue if its history, practices, and values are taught to young citizens by older citizens on an ongoing basis. Further, living in a democracy requires the experience of being socialized into its norms by direct experience. A public school, therefore, is both the training ground of our democratic society and its mirror. Virtually every kind of young person in any given community is there, from every background represented in that locale. Kids from every race, sex, class, ethnicity, gender, ability, immigration status, and belief system. Understanding that we're still a very segregated nation and that all too many neighborhoods, towns, and cities remain relative monocultures. Regardless, this generally diverse student body has to learn how to get along and work together toward common goals, just like they will to one degree or another in their adult lives. This, more than any of the sadly diminishing number of civics classes on offer in today's public schools, teaches students how to be active citizens in a democracy. Or at least that was the ideal when public education became the standard a century back. But that ideal has been replaced by a pernicious new mantra. Public schools don't work. Our government can't afford to educate every child, and we shouldn't try. Political front groups bankrolled by corporations, ultimately seeking to privatize public schools and convert them into a profitable industry, are convincing average Americans to help destroy their own birthright to a good public education on little more evidence than such cynical slogans. They are leading the charge to steal public funds from public education, more than $450 million this fiscal year alone in the Commonwealth, according to the Mass Teachers Association, and give them to charter schools that do not have a mandate to educate every child in their communities. Only the better students who have parents with the time and money to participate in mandatory charter school family activities. Public schools are getting stripped of their best and brightest in this fashion, sending their performance into decline in many instances and strengthening the argument that charter schools are inherently superior to the publics, something that study after study shows is not the case. Students in those charter schools do not sit in class with other students from every conceivable background. They sit with a limited selection of classmates. And they are taught, whether their teachers intended or not, to be elitists. Not just that they are smarter than other students, which can happen in any school, but that they are better than other students. The same thing has happened for generations in private schools too, but Americans do have the democratic right to organize private schools if they want to, as long as they are prepared to fund those schools without significant government support. And private schools have not attempted to tear down the public school system the way charter schools and the corporate titans behind them have been doing. Nor are they as damaging to our society as the often wildly antisocial and anti-democratic homeschooling movement has been, a topic for another day. So parents, remember that your decision about where to send your kids to school has very serious consequences for the future of our democracy. And students, it's true that no school is perfect and that all schools suck at least some of the time, but where would you rather be? In a school that truly reflects your community and the best American values of equality, justice, and opportunity for all, or in a school that only believes that elite students deserve a good education and to hell with everyone else? It's your decision, as long as we remain a democratic nation. For Beyond Boston, I'm Jason Pramis.